The world is full of buried treasures, some that are searched for, and some you just sort of stumble upon. Join us as we have a look at some artifacts that were accidentally unearthed. Lascaux Cave. The Lascaux Cave discovery reads a little bit like the start of a horror movie, but it doesn't turn out as grisly. 4 French teenagers were walking around in the forest, doing what regular French teenagers do, when one of their dogs began sniffing at a mysterious hole in the ground. That hole would lead to a stone shaft, and that's when the boys decided to crawl in and shimmy down. Despite the inherent dangers of this exploration, the payoff would be worth it, because the boys came across an enormous underground cavern system, one with over 2,000 prehistoric paintings and engravings that adorn the walls. Naturally, the kids made a pact to explore the treasures in secret, and naturally it didn't happen. That's because they would give in and tell their teacher, who then delved in to try and verify the authenticity of the teens' findings. Very quickly, word would be spread across Europe of the Sistine Chapel of Prehistoric Art, as the Lascaux Cave was christened, and the collection of animal paintings and etchings has been dated back to over 15,000 years ago. The Terra Cotta. When you're doing a manual labor job like digging a ditch, it can really be a burden to have to move a big rock or a tree root, but it could be worse. In 1974, a team of 7 farmers was attempting to dig a well near the city of Xi'an when one of their shovels struck something hard. That's when a little bit of digging would reveal it to be a carved stone head. This caused the team some excitement, but trying to pull the sculpture out of the ground made them reconsider. That's when archaeologists came to check out the site and were absolutely blown away. What the men thought was one bust actually turned out to be the tomb of the first emperor of the Chinese dynasty, and the head they found was a small part of 8,000 life-size terracotta soldiers, chariots, and horses. This massive, incredibly detailed army was built to guard the emperor in the afterlife and had been serving submissively ever since the 3rd century BC. Each soldier is individually carved with a unique face and physical traits, and this mind-boggling collection of early art has been widely viewed as being one of the most important archaeological discoveries ever made in China. The Venus de Milo. Some of the more famous people in the world actually came from relatively unknown roots, and the same can be true of art. In 1820, a peasant builder named Georgios Kontratas was trying to salvage marble blocks from some ancient ruins in Melos, an island in Greece. But instead of building blocks, he would discover the top half of an armless statue. Fortunately for him, a French officer by the name of Olivier Vauthier was also hunting for relics nearby, and when he saw the top half of the Venus de Milo, he was in shock and awe. He would pay the builder to help him unearth the lower portion of the statue, and with its draped legs in hand, he went on to sell one of the world's most famous statues. It would be sold to the Ottoman Empire, and the priceless artwork was then passed on to the king and then eventually donated to the Louvre in Paris. It still remains a priceless work of art, and while many people think that it's meant to be Aphrodite, no one has much of a clue what actually happened to her arms, or what they were meant to be doing or holding before they went missing into the sands of time. Terracotta. Now, when you're renovating a home, you're never quite sure what you're actually going to find. There's a chance that a rich grandfather maybe hid a Rembrandt in the walls, but you're not likely to find a whole new world. In the Cappadocia region of Turkey, a local would be renovating his home in 1963 when he would knock down a wall. Then, after the dust would settle, the man noticed a passageway that ended up leading to an enormous set of underground tunnels and buildings. That man would discover the lost city of Terracotta, dug by hand through miles of volcanic ash. The city is thought to have housed over 20,000 people, and it was also complete with shops, meeting halls, multiple freshwater wells, and even stables. Throughout Cappadocia, there are several underground dwellings and cloisters, as it was a fairly common and pretty defensible way to go about living in ancient times. Bandwell. Some discoveries may seem, well, pretty interesting at first, but can end up being world-class finds. The Bandwell Caves in Somerset, England were first discovered in the mid-1700s. While this may be pretty ancient already, it actually gets older. In 1824, they were opened to the public as show caves, where a small fee would be charged to benefit a local school. The issue was that the cave in question, the Stalactite Cave, was actually fairly hard for tourists to actually reach. So construction was done for a new entry. A tunnel would be dug into a wall, and the diggers would come across what immediately became known as the Bone Cave. That's because the Bone Cave was perhaps once a pitfall trap, but it was used over 80,000 years ago according to scientists. They say that early hunters would wait until their prey would impale themselves on the bottom of the pit before ravenously eating the meat raw. Some animals found in this ancient pit are the remnants from the Ice Age and are thought to have vanished off the face of the earth even before Noah's biblical flood. The Rosetta Stone. Sometimes even the most doomed of projects can have unexpected and positive results. When Napoleon Bonaparte would attempt to take Egypt in the late 1700s, he failed pretty badly. But he also brought along a group of scientists, historians, and language experts. They were all there to collect relics and study up on the country's history. Much of the work of the aptly named Institute of Egypt goes unrecognized, but they really hit their stride in 1977. That's when a group of soldiers led by Bouchard would be attempting a renovation in the French fort near Rosetta, a small town. The soldiers knocked through a wall and came across an ancient slab of basalt. Naturally, they called up the Institute. That's when the stone would be dated back to the 2nd century BC and was inscribed with an ancient edict. But the important fact about this discovery is that it was written in 3 languages, being Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. The language experts in the party were absolutely stunned. Until that point, the art and the meaning behind the hieroglyphs had been lost for thousands of years. But using their ability to read ancient Greek, the team spent 20 years working to crack the code. Once it was deciphered, a new school of archaeology would be created. This school would focus on the ancient works of the Egyptians, as the world was finally equipped with tools to study their magnificent language. The Dead Sea. Now, if you stumble upon a relic as a teenager, you might be inclined to get rid of it for some fast cash. And this may or may not end up being worth it. However, a group of Arab teenagers were tending to livestock in 1947 near the ancient city of Jericho. One of them lost a sheep, and the boys were searching the hills for it. When one of them came upon a cave, he did whatever any angsty teenager would do in their right mind. He picked up a rock and threw it into the hole. But when he heard the distinct sound of pottery shattering, he knew that something else was up. Upon investigation, the cave turned out to hold several jars containing sheets of papyrus scrolls. The boys thought that they had hit the jackpot, and they sold the entire lot to an antique collector for just $50. As it turns out, these were the caves of Qumran, and these Qumran caves housed the Dead Sea Scrolls. And those scraps of the collection would eventually be sold off for millions. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain some of the earliest known pieces of the Bible, and they're also widely considered to be one of the more important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Ulaburren. Now, anytime that you go diving, there's a chance that you're going to discover something ancient or even awesome. Even if you don't, it'll probably be a fun time, but that's not really the point. In 1982, a man would be swimming in the Mediterranean Sea diving for sea sponges. He came across a little more than he bargained for when he discovered the ruins of an ancient ship. The wreck had been submerged for so long that nothing remained of the hull. But the man could tell it had been about 50 feet long and could see different relics made of ceramic and metal. This would be termed the Ulaburren shipwreck, and underwater archaeologists would spend over 10 years and 20,000 divers in order to study the ship. The treasures found aboard were magnificent and widely diverse. made up of relics like hippopotamus teeth, jeweled urns, and a scarab, inscribed with the word Nefertiti, the name of the ancient Egyptian queen. A fragment of wood found dates the ship to be about 3,300 years, making it one of the oldest wrecks ever discovered. Richard III. So much of archaeology focuses on accidental discoveries that it really makes you think about what else is out there. In 2012, laborers in England were digging a new level in a parking garage, and that's when they accidentally unearthed the king of all findings. Well, certainly a king. As it turns out, it was the body of Richard III, once the King of England, was found in a rough-hewn grave below a car parking lot. The grave itself was too small for the body, which suggested that he was just sort of stuffed into the ground. To complicate things further, Richard's feet were also missing, but the body had been lost to historians for over 500 years. Richard suffered 10 wounds and died a very violent death. 1 or 2 blows to the head are presently deemed the cause of the king's death, and this incredible finding was just inches away from being destroyed. But when the DNA test came back as a match, it was stunning to its analysts. When the match was made, there was an inquiry as to whether or not Richard III would receive a royal reburial at Westminster Abbey. However, it was decided to keep him near his old gravesite in a cathedral. Antikythera mechanism. This mysterious artifact almost looks like something from the future, but it's actually at least 2,000 years old. This machine of sorts was found in the remains of a sunken Greek cargo ship. It's made of bronze and contains an intricate system of 30 hand-cut gears. The face of the device also has characters etched into it. Now, at first, archaeologists thought that it might be a navigation